All right, looking at chapter 10, the title is The Substance of the Shadow. Now, a quick reminder, this is picking up directly after chapter 9, obviously, but where Darnay's trial has started. What we have just learned is that the three people who have denounced Charles Darnay are Madame Defarge, Monsieur Defarge, and, surprise, Alexander Manette, his father-in-law. So here, what we find in chapter 10 is a journal type entry that Alexander Manette made over the years of his imprisonment. So that is what chapter 10 is all about. It's the reason behind Dr. Manette's imprisonment. So starting now, chapter 10, The Substance of the Shadow. I, Alexander Manette, unfortunate physician, native of Beauvais, and afterwards resident in Paris, write this melancholy paper in my doleful cell in the Bastille during the last month of the year 1767. I write it at stolen intervals, under every difficulty. I design to secrete it in the walls. No, let me pause because that's not secrete. I design to secret it in the wall of the chimney, where I have slowly and laboriously made a place of concealment for it. Some pitying hand may find it there, when I and my sorrows are dust. These words are formed by the rusty iron point with which I write with difficulty in scrapings of soot and charcoal from the chimney, mixed with blood, in the last month of the 10th year of my captivity. Hope has quite departed from my breast. I know from terrible warnings I have noted in myself that my reason will not long remain unimpaired. But I solemnly declare that I am at this time in the possession of my right mind, that my memory is exact and circumstantial, and that I write the truth as I shall answer for these my last recorded words, whether they be ever read by men or not, at the eternal judgment seat. One cloudy moonlit night, in the 3rd week of December, I think the 22nd of the month, in the year 1757, I was walking on a retired part of the quay by the Seine for the refreshment of the frosty air, at an hour's distance from my place of residence in the street of the School of Medicine, when a carriage came along behind me, driven very fast. As I stood aside to let that carriage pass, apprehensive that it might otherwise run me down, a head was put out the window, and a voice called to the driver to stop. The carriage stopped as soon as the driver could rein in the horses, and the same voice called to me by my name. I answered. The carriage was then so far in advance of me that 2 gentlemen had time to open the door and alight before I came up with it. I observed that they were both wrapped in cloaks and appeared to conceal themselves. As they stood side by side near the carriage door, I also observed that they both looked of about my own age, or rather younger, and that they were greatly alike in stature, manner, voice, and, as far as I could see, face too. "You are Dr. Manette," said one. "I am. Dr. Manette, formerly of Beauvais," said the other. "The young physician, originally an expert surgeon, who within the last year or two has made a rising reputation in Paris." "Gentlemen," I returned, "I am the Dr. Manette of whom you speak so graciously." "We have been to your residence," said the first, "and not being so fortunate as to find you there, and being informed that you were probably walking in this direction, we followed in the hope of overtaking you. Will you please to enter the carriage?" The manner of both was imperious, and they both moved, as these words were spoken, so as to the place between me and themselves and the carriage door. They were armed. I was not. "Gentlemen," said I, "pardon me, but I usually inquire who does me the honor to seek my assistance, and what is the nature of the case to which I am summoned?" The reply to this was made by him who had spoken second. "Doctor, your clients are people of condition. As to the nature of the case, our confidence in your skill assures us that you will ascertain it for yourself better than what we can describe. Enough. Will you please to enter the carriage?" I could do nothing but comply, and I entered it in silence. They both entered after me, the last springing in after putting up the steps. The carriage turned about and drove on at its former speed. I repeat this conversation exactly as it occurred. I have no doubt that it is, word for word, the same. I describe everything exactly as it took place, constraining my mind not to wander from the task. Where I make the broken marks that follow here, I leave off for the time and put my paper in its hiding place. So you're going to see a lot of breaks in the page, a lot of times where the time period jumps forward. This is because he can only write at very short intervals at a time because he's not allowed to be doing this. So he's having to sneak it. And but the story itself is going to go in a continual flow. So it's not super, it shouldn't be super confusing for you. All right, picking up with the carriage. The carriage left the streets behind, passed the north barrier, and emerged upon the country road. At 2/3 of a league from the barrier, I did not estimate the distance at the time, but afterwards when I traversed it, it struck out of the main avenue and presently stopped at a solitary house. We all three alighted and walked by a damp, soft footpath in a garden where a neglected fountain had overflowed to the door of the house. It was not opened immediately. In answer to the ringing of the bell, and one of my two conductors struck the man who opened it with his heavy riding glove across the face. There was nothing in this action to attract my particular attention, for I had seen common people struck more commonly than dogs. But the other of the two, being angry likewise, struck the man in like manner with his arm. The look and bearing of the brothers were then so exactly alike that I then first perceived them to be twin brothers. All right, here again we see that motif, remembering that a motif is a commonly occurring idea or symbol or something like that. Here we have that motif of doubles popping up again. The two men who stopped Dr. Manette are twins, so they look exactly alike. Picking up from the time of our alighting at the outer gate, which we found locked, and which one of the brothers had opened to admit us and had relocked, I had heard cries proceeding from an upper chamber. I was conducted to this chamber straight, the cries growing louder as we ascended the stairs, and I found a patient in a high fever of the brain lying on a bed. The patient was a woman of great beauty and young, assuredly not much past 20. Her hair was torn and ragged. Her arms were bound to her sides with sashes and handkerchiefs. I noticed that these bonds were all portions of a gentleman's dress. On one of them, which was a fringed scarf for a dress of ceremony, I saw the armorial bearings of a noble and the letter E. So here we can use our context clues to figure out who these two men are. The clothing that is being used to tie this woman to her bed is marked with a symbol for nobility, and there is a inscription of the letter E on it. So the only people that we know with the letter E is the Marquis St. Evremond. Picking up with I saw this within the first minute of my contemplation of the patient, for in her restless striving she had turned over on her face on the edge of the bed, had drawn down the end of the scarf into her mouth, and was in danger of suffocation. My first act was to put out my hand to relieve her breathing, and in moving the scarf aside, the embroidery in the corner caught my sight. I turned her gently over, placed my hand upon her breast to calm her and keep her down, and looked into her face. Her eyes were dilated and wild, and she constantly uttered piercing shrieks and repeated the words, "My husband, my father, my brother," and then counted up to 12 and said, "Hush." For an instant and no more she would pause to listen, and then the piercing shrieks would begin again, and she would repeat the cry, "My husband, my father, and my brother," would count up to 10 and say, "Hush." There was no variation in the order or the manner. There was no cessation but the regular moment's pause in the utterance of these sounds. "How long," I asked, "has this lasted?" To distinguish the brothers, I will call them the elder and the younger. By the elder, I mean he whom exercised the most authority. It was the elder who replied, "Since about this hour last night." "She has a husband, a father, and a brother?" "A brother." "I do not address her brother." He answered with great contempt, "No." she have some recent association with the number 12? The younger brother impatiently rejoined, with 12 o'clock? See, gentlemen, said I, still keeping my hands upon her breast, how useless I am as you have brought me. If I had known what I was coming to see, I could have come provided. As it is, time must be lost. There are no medications to be attained in this lonely place. The elder looked to the younger, who said haughtily, There is a case of medicines here, and brought it from a closet and put it on the table.